All right, all right. We are coming back from break. Next up, we'll have Brian Crain from Chorus One. He'll be speaking on the topic of scaling Ethereum, the innovations unlocking staking opportunity. Please give a warm welcome to Brian Crain.
Hey, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for coming. So I'm excited today to talk a little bit about Ethereum staking and some of the key innovations or trends and that are affecting Ethereum staking and also the kind of Ethereum staking yield. So briefly about myself, I've been in crypto for a long time. I've been involved in proof of stake for a long time. So in 2017, I was CEO of Tendermint. The company started Cosmos ecosystem. So I've been involved in there since the beginning, and then started Chorus One as one of the first staking companies about 7 years ago. So just briefly about Chorus One. So again, we've been running for around 7 years. We support around 65 different networks, and we work with individual delegators, a lot of VC funds, custodians, wallets, exchanges, all kinds of different parties to help them stake their assets and earn yield on it. So you can see some of our partners here. Now today I want to touch on 3 topics, and I hope I get through all of them. But first of all, pre-confirmations. So this has been one of the most hot areas of innovation and activity in the Ethereum space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about restaking, and then finally touch on MEV and timing games. So pre-confirmations. So basically, what's a pre-confirmation? So one of the challenges in Ethereum is that you make a transaction, it goes into the mempool, and then you wait, and then at some point it's like confirmed it's in the block. So that delay between I make the transaction and it's actually in the block is pretty long. And so one of the ideas that has been explored in Ethereum is whether you can give a guarantee that the transaction is going to be included in a future block, like immediately. And so that has a lot of potential upsides. Of course, to be able to do that, you need to have the different actors that work in this Ethereum supply chain, like the proposers, the relays, and the block builders, somehow change some of these flows and cooperate with this. And the user could also be a roll-up or a wallet or something, but that would pay basically a fee for this transaction inclusion. So here's basically how it will work, right? The user, and I should also mention, there's different approaches to pre-confirmation. There's one approach which leverages the validators, the proposer, to give a guarantee, and there's another approach which focuses on the builder. So builder is kind of primary as a company, focus on that. Proposer is like Chainbound, for example, and Commit Boost focus on that. So this is the proposer flow. So as a user, I make a transaction and I request a pre-confirmation and I pay some extra payment. I send this to the proposer. The proposer then basically tells the block builder, hey, when you create the block, you have to include this transaction. And then the builder creates a block that includes that transaction, sends it back to the proposer, and then it goes into the blockchain. So that's really how pre-confirmations work. Now, what are the upsides of this? Well, one potentially is better user experience, right? Like you don't have to wait so long anymore to have a confirmation. But I think a lot of the interest around this is also around rollups and how it can power rollups, especially based rollups that use the Ethereum validator set as a sequencer. And so what are some of the potential upsides of this? I mean, potentially, right, if it improves the Ethereum user experience, it could help getting more usage of the network. It may also have some impact on MEV rewards, which is still complex to see what that would look like. But one of the big challenges is, how do you price a pre-confirmation? So as a proposer, someone says like, hey, include this transaction and I pay you X. Like what is an appropriate amount for X? Because in the end, this is also something that can then constrain the builder in terms of how that block looks like, so it can potentially decrease the value of the block to the builder. So you have to somehow weigh these two things, and that's a hard problem that I think we don't have great answers for. If someone's interested, we have some website which is very technical but kind of goes into this a little bit. So you can go check out preconf.chorus.one. We've been involved in this since the beginning. So you can see we were did one of the first pre-confirmation transactions on the testnet. And but it's still very early with pre-confirmations. I think it's going to take quite a while for this to roll out because it requires a lot of different parties. They have to figure out how this whole thing works. So I think realistically, it's probably like 2 years away from having real scale adoption of pre-confirmations in Ethereum. So next thing, restaking. So restaking, of course, is a very simple idea, right? Like you're staking a token, and then the token is often slashable. But if you look at the history of Ethereum, I think in the entire history of Ethereum, the amount of ETH that was slashed is like $4 million. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount compared to how much has been staked. So you can see that really, like, the thing that's at risk is actually very small. And mostly it's just that capital is like locked up and sort of doing not much. And so of course the idea of like, can I use that capital to do something else has been around for a long time. And it's a very promising idea. In Cosmos, there's been various efforts here. In Solana now, there's many, although these came later. But of course, the space where we've seen the most development here has been Ethereum, especially with Eigenlayer leading the charge here, but more recently also Symbiotic getting some good traction. But the idea is really that you stake the token, and now you use the stake token to secure some additional services, and you get some additional yield from that. So if you look at the market here, so currently you have around 5 million ETH, so that's, well, probably less than $14 billion now. But hopefully soon 14 billion or more again. But that's basically in restaking protocols right now. So if you compare this to the overall staking marketplace, you can actually see it's quite a lot, right? So in a relatively short time, we managed to get, around the seventh of the staked ETH also being restaked. So, and if you see the distribution here, you can see that Eigenlayer is very dominant with something like 85% of all the ETH being restaked to Eigenlayer. You have Symbiotic in number 2 with 10%, and then Kerak has 4%. Now, this is another thing that's interesting. So if you look at Lido, right, you have around 9.4 million ETH staked, Eigenlayer 4.4 million. What's also worth noting here is that actually a lot of the stake is native stake. So it's not a liquid staked tokens. Now, the reason for this is that is this one here, right? Because most of the ETH that is being staked through restaking protocol actually uses these LRTs. So it's basically like another liquid staking asset that's being issued. And these LRTs, they don't want to pay the extra fee to Lido, right? So they basically say, hey, we are going to stake it directly to basically save cost and increase revenues. So that's why you have, that's why out of the Eigenlayer thing, most of it doesn't come through liquid staking asset, like staked ETH or something like that. But we can also see, I mean, Eigenlayer has had a tremendous success in attracting a lot of stake to the platform. You can see here the kind of growth of Eigenlayer. It grew very quickly, but it has been going down a little bit for a while. And you can also see it had some negative impact on, for example, Lido's TVL, where some of Lido's TVL moved over to Eigenlayer. Now, I think this is a very important thing to wrap your head around, is actually the economics of restaking. So the basic staking yield, let's say we put 3.5% there, it varies of course, but like it's something like that. Now if you do restake, then you can earn some additional yield. Now where does this additional yield come from? I mean, one is the native token of the restaking protocols, like Eigen. That was pretty high in the past, but it has dropped, and today it's around 1% or even a little bit less. Then you have LRT incentives. Now those also used to be pretty substantial, but they have basically stopped at this point. So they've used a lot of these incentives to bootstrap adoption, and now they kind of run out. So that only contributes a little bit to the APR. And then finally we have the rewards coming from the AVSs. I wrote 0.2% there, but that's actually probably overestimating it. Like right now, they're close to 0. So now that means that the restaking APR has been going down and down, and I think that's going to actually pose quite a challenge for restaking protocols, and especially Eigenlayer probably, because what you can see is there's actually a tremendous amount of leverage in restaking. So people restake the token, and then what a lot of them do is so they put it into something like ETHFi or Renzo. They get their LRT tokens, or the ETHFi ETH, Easy ETH from Renzo, or Kelp ETH, and then they put this into Aave, they borrow ETH, and then they loop this. So you can see here the amount of leverage here. You can see that for all of these protocols, a majority of tokens, in the case of Kelp, it's almost 3/4, are actually deposited in Aave, and they are being used to to basically leverage this up. Now, of course, the challenge here is that if the staking APR for restaking keeps going down, then you're probably going to see a lot of this stuff unwind. So I think what we can see from this is that it's really essential for restaking and for platforms like Eigenlayer and Symbiotic that we're going to have like real yield from the AVSs, because that's the only thing that's like sustainable and long term. And I think what we're probably going to see is that we're going to see a kind of unwinding of a lot of this leverage and a decrease in the TVL. And then I think we really need to see the ABS yields come up for this to kind of revert, and for like ETH wanting to probably stay in restaking protocols. So that's kind of like the restaking. Now, of course, restaking has a lot of nice properties, right? Because it means you can use those assets to secure layer 2s. You can secure other types of infrastructure like bridges, oracles, data availability networks like EigenDA, and it it improves the capital efficiency, and of course for the stakers even today, right? It still provides additional yield. So that's restaking, and I think it's it's kind of a nice. It is something that's very promising thing for the future of Ethereum, where Ethereum can be used to really secure a lot of additional services and generate additional revenues. So I wanted to touch a last topic very briefly, which is around MEV and timing games. So this is one area where we were quite active in the past, but basically it has to do with the following, right? If a validator creates a block, then the later in the slot that block comes, the more valuable it becomes. The reason for that is that you have more transaction and they have more fees, and MEV, a lot of the MEV comes from the divergence of the prices on DEXs from the prices on like Binance or like, and so as that divergence goes up, the MEV goes up. So you basically have some kind of curve where the value of a block goes up as time goes on, and it's not a linear increase. It goes up kind of more steeply than that. So if you can delay when you create the block, you can generate more value and capture more value. So so this is one thing we were working on very early on. So we were the first ones to really systematically experiment with this, and we created a modified client called Adagio that basically changed the latency parameters and tried to measure how late can we propagate this block and to increase and to generate additional MEV revenues. So we generated quite a lot of additional MEV revenues with this for a while. But then what actually happened is that the relays, so ultrasound and others, they said, well, we should also include that, right? We should start holding back the block and do it a little bit later to increase the value of the block. So that has also meant that our particular, Ethereum fork we were running has become kind of less useful because the whole network started adopting this approach to increase the value of Ethereum blocks. So now, of course, there are always going to be new things around latency optimization and generating more MEV returns. And so, we're we are exploring some of those new things now. So yeah, if someone's interested, there's some kind of academic paper we wrote on this topic in the past. So yeah, that's all from my end. If you want to reach out, feel free to email me or check out course.one or get in touch. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian Crain.